Hi everybody, Narelle here. Welcome back to another video. If you're new here, hello, thank you for joining. And if you have seen one of our other videos, thank you so much for coming back and watching another one. Today I'm going to be talking about our expenses since we've been on the road. So a little bit of a backstory, if you haven't seen our video about what we were doing this year. My husband Darren and I took a year off work, and our plans were to do some travel, both overseas and in the Kombi, and we wanted to see whether or not, one, we could afford to do it, and number two, if it was something we wanted to do full time. And we're going to make a whole other video about what we discovered, whether we want to do this long term, whether we're going to go back to work, and all of that. And you're going to have to excuse me, I am in the backyard of a friend's place and they are having a party 2 doors down, so there is a bit of music in the background. But I've got my new mic, so hopefully that will work well. So a little bit of a backstory. We've taken the year off work. We did some overseas travel throughout the year, as well as a 6 months stint in the Kombi. We did a 3-month stint, then we came back, we did a mini cruise, and then we went on another 2 to 3 months. So we've spent about 6 months in total out of the whole year in the van. Along with that, we also did some house sits just to break up being in the van, because as you can imagine, the Kombi is we love it so much, but it is nice to stretch out in a nice full-size bed and get a bit of relaxation, a bit of comfort. So the house sits were fantastic, but in all, we probably spent a good 5 months in the Kombi itself. So today I'm going to go through all of our expenses over a 3 months period, just to see whether or not we hit our goals that we wanted when we first set off. So in the 3 months that I'm going to cover, we did cover a lot of Ks in that time. We travelled from Melbourne to Queensland and back again. So Melbourne to Queensland is about 1,800 kilometres. So just getting to Queensland and back again were 3,600 kilometres. And then there would have been a couple of thousand Ks just going up to Rockhampton to do a house sit and just general running around. We were lucky when we were in Queensland because my daughter lives in Queensland, so we did have use of her car sometimes while we were up there. And we also heavily relied on public transport, because once we were parked up with the Kombi, and we did stay at a couple of caravan parks, and I'll talk about that soon. Once the Kombi is all set up, it's really hard to pack it all down just to go for a trip. So we did use public transport a lot up in Queensland, and we did do a little bit in New South Wales as well. But we predominantly went from Melbourne to Brisbane, to further up north, and then back again with a couple of little stops in New South Wales. So in the future, if we were to go somewhere and for longer periods of time, then some of these costs, especially for petrol, wouldn't be as high because we wouldn't be on the move as much. If we want to do this longer term, then obviously we're going to be parked longer, we're not going to be driving around longer, so fuel costs are going to be a bit cheaper. So I've got my notes here so I don't miss anything. So let's look at the numbers. So I've broken down our expenses into the following categories. So we had petrol, accommodation, food, which included takeaway and eating out, public transport, and then miscellaneous things. I had set a pretty low budget. We actually don't spend a lot when we're in the Kombi, and I know Australia is very expensive, but the way we travel with a lot of free sites, no cost accommodation, really petrol and food are our main expenses. So the only thing I would probably do in the future is break down my miscellaneous a little bit more. So our miscellaneous included things like tolls, firewood, gas refills. I actually was quite sick for a lot of the trip we were away, so we did have to do, there was a lot of doctor's appointments. I had to have some chest scans, I had pneumonia, and so there was a lot of medications, antibiotics, so that ended up being, quite a few $100s as well, which was unexpected, but it is what it is. So let's have a look at the breakdown. Okay, so firstly, petrol. So like I said, this includes about 6,000 Ks of travel. And we were really lucky. For some reason, the last 6 months in Australia, the petrol has been quite reasonable. And Queensland was actually a lot cheaper than here in Victoria. So we were looking at around about, we put premium 98 in the combi, and usually we can expect to pay $2.12, $2.15 for 98 in Melbourne. Now we were getting it for as low as $1.80 up north. So going forward, petrol, you know, it could be a lot more expensive. So that was, petrol came to $1,405. And most of this was highway miles. So sitting out on the highway, we always try and take the main highways so that we are getting the best fuel economy we can. So that was petrol. Our next category was accommodation. Now we did probably, I would say, 70% free camping. We did stay with our daughter for a little bit as well. Like I said, we did some house sits as well. So that came to $503. Now, we did stay at a few coastal places. There are some places in Australia you cannot find free camping at all. And as much as we would like to be stealth, if you've seen our van, you cannot, it's very hard to be stealth in this. We stick out like anything. So there were a lot of times when we were in Brisbane, in the main cities, on the coast, we had to pay for caravan parks. There was just no getting around it. So 503 for 3 months is not too bad, I don't think. So the next category was food. Now that came to $1,580. That's an average of about $130 a week. Now, that's a little bit expensive, but that also includes a few times we went out for dinner, which we didn't go out very often for dinner. That's only a couple of times. Very little takeaway. Maybe we might have bought takeaway once a fortnight. So that's mostly just groceries. We did mostly shop at Aldi's. So whenever we were in a town or city and there was an Aldi's, we would stock up as much as we could. So that was pretty good. I thought that's not too bad. That was included alcohol as well. Not that we bought a lot of alcohol while we were away, but that does include alcohol as well. Okay, moving right along, public transport. So while we were in Queensland, like I said, we did use the public transport quite a bit. We were really lucky. Most of the places we were staying, we were quite near a railway station, which was really good. And about 6 months ago, Queensland introduced 50-cent fares. So you can take a fare anywhere in Queensland. You get on a train, a bus. Once you get off, it's 50 cents. You can go from one end of Queensland to the other, and as long as it's one trip, it's 50 cents. So we spent a total of $80. Now that did include, I think, maybe 1 or 2 Uber rides, one to the airport when we were coming home, and there was another one we went out one night. So there was, I think, 2 Uber trips in there. So $80 for public transport is really, really good. And we did use it quite a bit when we were up there. Now, finally, the miscellaneous. Now, like I said, next time round, I will definitely break this down a little bit more. And like I said, this is like tolls, refilling our gas cylinders, the medical things that I needed to get, firewood, phone plan. Definitely need to break that up next time round. That came to a total of $714. Now, of that, I think about $260 of that were out-of-pocket medical expenses for me to see a doctor while we were up in Queensland. I needed to get a chest CT to see what was going on with my lungs, and some antibiotics and things like that. So $260 is out of pocket is actually not too bad for CT scans and doctor's appointments, but that was a big, chunk of the miscellaneous. And then there was phone plans, which we've got very minimal phone plans here. That might have only been $20, $30. So that's not a big part of the $714. So yeah, tolls going through Sydney. Queensland does have a lot of toll roads. So, that's probably about $150 of that is tolls alone. So that's the breakdown of roughly of the $714 of miscellaneous. Okay, so totaling everything up, we spent $4,282 for a 3-month or 12-week period. Now, we were out on the road for 6 months, but I just did a snapshot of the 3 months of expenses, and the other 3 months were roughly the same, bar a few different things. So that's an average of only $357 per week for a 12-week period. So we were just over our $350 budget that we had put aside per week. So we came really, really close to our $350 budget. But you need to take into account we didn't really do any tours or outings or big ticket tours or anything in Australia, which are really, really, really expensive. But that wasn't the idea. It wasn't the plan for this trip. The main reason for going to Queensland, our daughter lives up there with her partner, so it was to see her, to spend time with her, to spend time with her partner's family. So it really wasn't. And we've been to Queensland a lot of times, so we've done all of the Great Barrier Reef, we've done all of those trips. So for us, it was really just to find our feet in full-time travel, not so much doing all of those touristy tours and things like that. We did some hikes, we saw some, we did a lot of free activities, but we didn't really do any of the paid activities like the theme parks up in Queensland and all that kind of stuff. So in conclusion, did our trip meet our expectations as far as cost-wise? Yes, it did. And there are definitely some parts that we could, save on for sure. Accommodation, if we were up there longer term, we would find more free accommodation. Petrol, definitely we would save on petrol if we were not moving around as quickly. We would definitely save on petrol. Also with accommodation, we would definitely do longer house sits. I think the longest house sit we did in Queensland was a week. So we could definitely do 2, 3, 4 weeks probably. 4 weeks would probably be the most that we would do in one spot. But definitely house sits will definitely help with the accommodation costs. Obviously medical costs, hopefully we won't incur those going forward too much. So it was really cost effective, even though the cost of traveling in Australia is, you hear it all the time, is very, very expensive. But you can do it cheaply if you're not eating out all the time. Like I said, we were lucky if we probably ate out 2 or 3 times. We don't particularly care for eating out. We're more than happy to make our own meals. We made sure that when we were at an Aldi's or in a big town, we would stock up as much as we could so that we could eat meals that we made and we didn't have to rely on going out all the time. So yeah, I hope that might give you a bit of an idea of how cheaply you can travel in Australia if you have your own van, which you can sleep in and cook in and all of that stuff. Throw in some house sits, definitely the way to go, the house sits, to break up your trip and just save on those accommodation costs. If we had to rely on caravan parks, our accommodation bill would have been probably 2 or 3 times the amount. So that's a real good saver. Please let me know down below if there is something I may have missed or something that you'd like to know. And if you've got any other tips on how we could even save more money on our travels around Australia, I'd love to also hear those down below as well. Thank you very much for sticking around, and I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.